Well. Good morning, West Ham fans. Russ and the West Ham Network. Hope you're all safe and well. If you're new here, give it a like, give it a comment, give it a share, give it one of those bloody good subscribes. If nothing else, for Anton's fantastic commentary yesterday. Obviously, on a Friday, we do Hammer's Headlines in association with the KMB.com boys, of course. But we tend to focus on the David Moyes press conference. It was early today, as many of the reason being is many of the journalists are sort of travelling back from Germany. Obviously, have covered the Freiburg game over there, and then they're coming over, so they tend to do it a little bit earlier than usual. So that's why we're on a little bit earlier for Hammer's Headlines in association with the KUMB.com boys. Keep saying it, it's repetitive. Very short press conference, so much so that we padded out with a bit of Eddie Howe's press conference as well. So I thought that was quite interesting as well, looking ahead of the game. Let's talk about Moyesy stuff. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about team news. Let's talk about Antonio, shall we? Obviously, Moyes alluded to the fact that Antonio wasn't travelling to Germany for the game. Obviously, didn't feature, as you know. He said he's not trained yet. He's done some running with the medical teams over the next couple of days. We will find out. So that pretty much says to me that Antonio will not be playing on Sunday. So that's going to be quite a couple of days. Yeah, I mean, a couple of days. You can't really have a couple of days and assume he's going to be back for the side, do you? Really, to be honest. So, be interested to see what happens now. You know, obviously we had Bowen and we had Kudus both playing against Freiburg, sort of moving. You know, Kudus was out on the right hand side, Bowen was up front, and they swapped. And obviously then Paqueta scored in more of a striker's role. So it's going to be interesting to see how we play that. It might mean that Kudus gets a start, and bloody well hope so, to be honest. I don't think he'll play Danny Ing. Well, I don't say that, but yesterday, part of the reason I thought yesterday was he didn't play Danny at all yesterday, did he? If I remember correctly. Oh, I don't know. I've just got excited and then not got excited. Anyway, we'll move on. Obviously, we've got a lot of positives coming out of the game. You know, obviously it's 17 undefeated games in Europe in a row. That's now a British record. Not only that, but by scoring it against Freiburg, that's the first time since 1968-69 season that we scored in our first 10 games of a season. You know, are you not entertained, as Gladiator would say? Instantly, if anyone wants to know, it was 11. They did 11 games. So obviously it would mean scoring against Newcastle and then scoring against Villa after the international break. Obviously it's international break. We'll talk about Bowen and stuff in a minute. Asked about the positives. He says, I think when you go into football management, you're never going to get it all rosy, and you need to be lucky to have a period where you don't have bad spells. But I feel like we're in a good run of form at the moment. We've won a few games, and I'm really pleased with how the players are performing. And I think that's fair enough to say that, you know, in terms of bringing in, you know, we've got those two stats I just reeled off now. You know, we're seventh. You know, we're 9 points better off than we were this time last year in the Premier League, having played at the time playing all three of the top three at the time. And it was obviously in terms of Man City, Liverpool, and Brighton, obviously only getting a result out of the Brighton game, but still, I think Newcastle will be a bigger test, and we'll talk about Newcastle in a little bit more detail in a bit. Obviously, he spoke about the international break. Obviously, the Bowen call-up, he was asked about what he thought about Bowen's call-up back into England fold. He said, I think Jared is maturing with his all-round play. I'm thrilled he has been called up for England because he works so hard in training. He's beginning to become a much more talented player all round. He started at Hereford, so it's great to see him step up through the leagues. And obviously, we go into England have two international, Australia and Italy, I believe, both at Wembley, I believe, as well. So not much travelling for Jared. Obviously, you've got Ariola's got called up as well to the French squad. So we'll do a full sort of debrief on Monday in terms of all the internationals and when everyone's playing and who's playing when and whatnot, just so you're on top of all that information. But obviously one of the things yesterday, particularly, as I said, you had the Bowen crossed, the Paqueta scored, and just in general, that link up between Paqueta and Bowen was really good yesterday, and he was asked specifically about that link up between the two players, and he said, I thought the four players played very well. I thought it was good to Good to look at Jared in the centre forward role in a competitive game with a lot riding on it. I thought the goal was a really worked goal, great cross, and a terrific header from Lucas. We took some good things out of the game, but we need more variables in attack. What's interesting for me is that line. It was good to look at Jared in a central forward role in a competitive match. So whether that does permeate, it's a long word for me, whether that does permeate into the side for Newcastle potentially, with the likes of Antonio not going to, very much unlikely to feature based on what Moyes says. But then that's Moyes, isn't it? Yes, there'll be calls for Mbama to get a run out, but in reality, I don't see Moyes playing him. It's not a slight on Mbama at all. We spoke at lengths about it in the pre-match to the game yesterday, because just talking about, I think that might be a show in itself, in terms of when does it benefit a player? When does it benefit a youngster getting 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, or going out on loan like Freddie Potts is doing at Wickham and having a great time? I think genuinely, I think that should be a thing we should look at in January, in all honesty. But trouble is, come January, we lose 4 of our players, 3 forwards, 4 players. So actually, he'll probably more likely get some game time in January, ironically, when and then they'll come back and he might get no game time again, which is very unfortunate because he's a hell of a player. Obviously, we look forward to the Newcastle game on Sunday. It's going to be a hell of a test, particularly after their win against PSG, which Moyes was asked specifically about that. We'll come to that in a bit. But asked about Newcastle in general, he was saying, I think Newcastle are one of the best teams in Europe at the moment. There's so much quality in their side and their manager has done such a good job. He has steered them into a good organisation shape, and I think they are some of the best in Europe at the minute. And indeed, you can't obviously not talk about the game where they basically demolished PSG with only about 30% possession as well, 4-1. Asked about that specific win. He goes, it's a night in Europe which we'll remember for so long. We had a great night here a few years ago against Sevilla, and there are nights in the club's history like that. And I think Newcastle had that against PSG. When you start to get involved in Europe, the Premier League becomes a different cycle because of the extra games. I think it will be very difficult to explain how tough it is. Indeed, I mean, we go back to talking about the side, for Newcastle, particularly having that sort of Champions League, Premier League, getting into that, used to that sort of setup. Now, Newcastle themselves are, we've got, if you're looking injury to West Ham, we've got Antonio, but the other injuries tend to be reserve, like squad players. So Ben Johnson got a knock. We knew that Cresswell got a knock as well. We were believed that Jarrod Bowen wasn't going to play at all, having had a knock and come off against Sheffield United. But apparently all that didn't happen, or it did be recovered quick enough there. He was potentially not going to be taken to Germany and rested, so he was ready for the Newcastle game. But that didn't happen. As I said, we then sort of tuned into Eddie Howe's press conference. I think we might do this more often because it just gives you a bit more information from the other side of the fence. He was asked about team news. Obviously, most of the press conference for Eddie was about the PSG win and yada, yada, yada. They spoke very briefly about West Ham mainly in terms of Declan Rice, in terms of how he, saying that, where is it? I'll get the actual quote up because it's easier than me trying to just paraphrase it. He said he was so important for them. He was the heartbeat of the team, but they replaced him well. It's always a challenge when you get a big fee for a player, but they've been very smart. They've had some tough fixtures, but they had a really good start. And we have had a really good start. But asked specifically about team news for Newcastle, we know they had a number of players out, but just to confirm that, Eddie said the injury list doesn't look great, but apart from Harvey, there's nothing long-term. We'll see how Callum and Joel Linton are. They're the closest to. Anthony suspended, which is a big blow. Sven won't make it. So, some big pluses there for West Ham ahead of that game. Just in terms of, so we know Harvey Barnes has got a long-term injury out until January, I believe. Joe Willock has got an injury. He didn't mention Joe but apparently he's not due back until the international break, after the international break. Same as Sven Botman. Anthony Gordon, we know, is suspended. Picked up a 5th yellow card for quite a petulant yellow card at the weekend. Callum Wilson is 75. Well, on my Premier League injuries website, 75% chance of playing, and I'm sure he'll want to against his podcast mate. In terms of Mikel Antonio, who probably won't play either. So there we go. And Joel Linton is down for only 25% chance of playing. So we'll see. But, even with several of those players already out, they did beat PSG 4-1. So it's not going to be easy. Anyway, because it's a bit early, it's all asked about tit at the moment. So I'm going to be doing the ratings in a bit. So go and check out. So it's about 12:30. We'll do the ratings. We're going to talk about Paqueta. Masterclass. And I believe Irish Tommy's going to be doing a late show tonight as well. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have some content coming out tomorrow, some interviews and stuff like that. And keep an eye out on the channel, all that good stuff. Don't forget to share, comment, subscribe. When you subscribe, make sure go back and check your preferences. I had to go and redo my preferences actually in terms of notifications to make sure you get all the content that comes out, or maybe become a channel member. I've had another 3 or 4 over the course of yesterday. So take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble. Actually, you don't have to worry about staying warm. It's gonna be nice weather this weekend. But anyway, come on, you irons.